So let's talk about why Valhalla is actually pretty good. Valhalla, cyberpunk bartender, action, isn't actually an action game, it's a visual novel type of game. And in those type of games, the story is obviously always really important. So while I won't spoil major plot points or twists, or anything like that, I will talk about some of the characters to an extent and maybe little chunks of dialogue. But as I said, no major spoilers. Alright then, let's go. Valhalla is a really interesting game for me personally because in a way it's the opposite of my life. In the real world I spent quite a lot of time getting shit-faced in a bar and telling the bartender how interesting and cool my life is. In Valhalla though, you are the bartender and you get people shit-faced and you listen to their stories. To be more precise, you play as Jill, a woman in her late 20s or early 30s or something, I don't know, who works in a bar with the name Valhalla. That's why the game is called that, The game takes place in the future in a place called Glitch City. And as we learn in the very pretty intro sequence, it's not a great place to live in. The government is corrupt, there's a constant shortage of basic groceries and a lot of violence, it's not good. You might expect the game to be somewhat depressing with a setting like this, but if I had to describe its tone and vibe with one word, it would be comfy. If you start playing for the first time, you even get a little message that tells you to get comfortable and grab a drink and some snacks, which I find very cute. But if I had to describe Valhalla's vibe in more detail, I would compare it with how going out for drinks with a friend can sometimes feel. You enjoy each other's presence, you laugh a lot, you talk about some dumb shit. But you also talk about some problems in your life and stuff that happened in the past that you regret. There's a certain feeling of melancholy, but it still feels good and comfy. At least the comfy part doesn't just come from the writing, but also the stress-free gameplay. The game is split into two sections. You chilling out in Jill's apartment and you working your shift in the bar. In the first of the two, you can read through articles, forum threads and blogs on your tablet, listen to songs from the soundtrack, and buy stuff for your apartment. You can't freely decorate your place though, everything you buy is being put in a predetermined place. I have that shirt as well. After you're done here, you can go to work. In the bartending section, you mostly just click yourself through dialogue. The only way in which you influence the conversations is by choosing which drinks you serve your customers. The way this works is that from time to time they order something. Sometimes they directly name the drink they want, but other times they are like, give me something sweet or strong or without alcohol or something girly or whatever. You then search out a fitting drink using your electronic recipe book in which you can sort drinks by name, type or flavor. After finding the right recipe, you just have to mix it together using the right amounts of these 6 ingredients. If you double the amount of ingredients, you make a bigger version of the drink. Some drinks have to be served on the rocks or aged, which you do by pressing these buttons. And some have to be blended, which is done by mixing them for more than 5 seconds. If you're thinking now, oh, that sounds really simple and easy, then you would actually be correct. Like 95% of the time it isn't a challenge to serve the right drink at all. And I'm not just saying that because I'm an epic alpha gamer who plays through Bloodborne twice a day and showers twice a year. No, it actually is very easy. But there are some exceptions. For example, later on some characters will go, give me the usual, and so if you don't remember what their go-to drink was, you will most likely screw up. There are also some parts where the game is a bit more playful and making the decision of what to serve a bit more interesting, which is cool. Which drink you choose has 2 consequences. The first is that you get paid less at the end of the day if you screw up. which means you can buy less stuff for your apartment. The second is that the dialogue changes. Sometimes the customer just goes, "Oh well, you kinda fucked up," and the rest of the conversation plays out exactly the same way it would have if you had gotten it right. But other times it changes quite a lot, in some cases so drastically that it basically becomes a completely different scene. I can't really tell you how often this is the case, because I only finished Valhalla once so far, and just revisited some parts after that to experiment and see how much things can change. I don't think that really matters though. The knowledge that things could at least potentially change a lot, based on your decisions, is enough to make the gameplay more engaging. But while the gameplay works well for the type of game this is, and the atmosphere it wants to create, it is obviously not the reason why you should play Valhalla. The reason why you should play it are the presentation and the writing. Honestly, I think the music alone would be enough to justify it. Although in that case you could also just get the soundtrack and listen to it on its own, I guess. So that didn't make too much sense. I actually bought it on CD, which is not really a thing I normally do with game soundtracks. I think I heard it being described as lo-fi music somewhere, but I'm not sure if I would agree. Okay, wait, now that I think about it, it probably does fall under that genre of music, if you look at the definition of it. Man, me and music theory, we're like this, right? I guess what my tiny brain meant is that the soundtrack doesn't sound like something you would hear on lo-fi beats to study, relax to, or something like that. Maybe that's kind of bullshit, but I feel that there's quite a bit of a Japanese city pop influence in a lot of the tracks. Like in this one, right? For me, Valhalla falls in the same category as games like Silent Hill 2 or Metroid Prime, where the soundtrack is such an integral part of the experience and the game's personality that it feels impossible to imagine any other music in its place. Even small stuff like the little jingle that plays when Jill takes her break at work, which means that you can save, adds so much to the game's atmosphere and charm. It's not just the quality of the individual tracks that's great though, but also the variety in styles and moods. You got pretty much everything from energetic bangers to slow melancholic ballads. If I had to pick a favorite track, I think it would be Safe Haven, the song that plays when you're in Jill's apartment. Because it just oozes comfiness. It's the musical equivalent of sitting on a couch under a warm blanket on a Friday night. It's that feeling, you know. And this is actually one of the few parts of the game where the music is predetermined. At the start of the bar sections, you always have to create a playlist on the jukebox. So you can always listen to your favorite tracks from the soundtrack while you look at the friggin' hot people in front of you. I actually really like the character designs in Valhalla, and not just because a lot of them are, well, you know. I'm not intelligent enough to explain in detail why they work so well for me, but I guess they do a pretty good job of conveying the character's personality, I suppose. It's also a plus how, literally, colorful the cast is. In a game where you have pretty much just two locations, most of the visual variety has to come from the characters. And that's why it's so pleasant to have these strong colors in their design. But while I like how they look, I could imagine someone looking at them and assuming that this is just an anime titty waifu kinda game. I mean, there's nothing wrong with enjoying some anime titties, but it still would sell this game way too short. Valhalla is actually a surprisingly well-written and mature game. And it tells a kind of story I normally don't see in video games. A slice-of-life story about a regular person. To be fair, I normally don't really play visual novel type of games, so maybe it's more common than I think. But from the ones I'm familiar with, it doesn't seem that way. Now that I think about it, Valhalla's story isn't just remarkable for a video game, but it is pretty unique in general. Or more precisely, the way in which it is told is. I always love those moments in TV shows or games or mangas or whatever, where the plot just kinda stops for a moment and the characters have time to hang out and talk with each other. In a way, Valhalla consists more or less just of these moments, and weirdly enough, it actually works. I think the main reason for that is that the characters are very charming and entertaining, and often have a few more layers than you might expect at first. Two of my favorites are Dorothy, a kinky robot girl who is a sex worker and really open about it, and Ingram, who I love because he's a massive edgelord. There's something really satisfying about getting to know these people and finding out more and more about their lives. But I also appreciate that some characters always remain a bit mysterious, giving your imagination room to fill in some gaps. Another thing I really like about this game's writing is how it handles world building. For the most part, it happens really organically through dialogue, without it sounding unnatural. You know, there's no one going, "Man, isn't it crazy that we bang robots nowadays?" No, there's none of that. A lot of the world building is also done through the articles and other stuff you can read in Jill's apartment. The thing is, while Valhalla has a cyberpunk setting, a lot of the dialogue and themes it touches on would still work without it. That doesn't mean that the setting is unnecessary or anything like that. I think it adds a lot to the game's atmosphere and charm. And there are still enough interesting conversations in the game that couldn't take place without it. But the main theme of the game isn't technology, AI, what makes a human or anything like that. It is way more about relationships, breakups, sexuality, you know, that kind of stuff. While it takes a while before it really starts to manifest, there is a main plot in the game which revolves around something from Jill's past. And this story is pretty simple and grounded and relatable and it's pretty fucking good. There are 6 different endings in the game. Which one you get depends on what you served your customers in certain moments, but also on other stuff. I don't want to go into detail here. Those endings are more like little epilogues though, that take place after the story's conclusion, which I don't mind at all. You get a bit more replay value through those ending sequences, but the story still always concludes in the same way. And it is a pretty great way. The last conversation you have and the way the game builds towards it is so well done, it's a fantastic ending. So yeah, Valhalla, good game. So yeah, bye.